Ukraine has found a brilliant way to trick Russia. Take a look at this. What you're seeing is an Iris-T. A German air defense system capable of shooting down missiles, drones, and aircraft from dozens of kilometers away. Ukraine received several of these from Germany. And in a country being bombarded every day, a system like this, which protects the entire sky, is worth its weight in gold. That's why Russia is obsessed with it. Destroying an Iris-T means opening a hole in the Ukrainian air shield, and that's exactly what the Russians have been trying to do since day one. Here you're seeing the view from a Russian drone flying over what appears to be exactly that, an Iris-T positioned at an air defense base in Kharkiv. Once the Russians identified the target, they acted quickly. A drone went on the attack, approached, fired a missile, and scored a direct hit. The Iris-T was destroyed. Mission accomplished. Another Ukrainian system eliminated. But there's a detail, a very important detail. This system never actually existed. Russia has just been fooled, and the way Ukraine is doing this will surprise you. The trick is so simple that it seems impossible that it works. Ukraine is spreading inflatable replicas of its own weapons across the battlefield. Rubber tanks, canvas missile systems, fake radars. Equipment that from a distance looks completely real, but inside is just air. Sounds like a joke, right? But what's happening with this in the war is much more serious than it seems. And to understand why it works, you need to know that this idea isn't new. In 1944, before D-Day, the largest military landing in history, the Allies needed to deceive Germany about where the attack would happen. And what did they do? They filled the English coast with inflatable tanks, fake planes, and canvas trucks. They created such a convincing phantom force that the Germans moved entire divisions to the wrong place, while the real soldiers landed in Normandy, and Germany was waiting for the attack somewhere else. This group became known as the Ghost Army, operated in more than 20 different battlefields, and it worked because disinformation, when done well, paralyzes the enemy before a single shot is fired. 80 years later, the logic is the same, but the paradox has become even more absurd. Because in 1944, the replicas needed to fool human eyes in airplanes flying at a certain altitude. Today, they need to fool drones with thermal cameras, radar sensors, and artificial intelligence. You would think that this would make the replicas useless. After all, the more surveillance technology there is, the easier it is to spot a fake, right? But what's happening is exactly the opposite. And it wasn't a military engineer who created this. It wasn't a defense lab funded by billions. The man responsible for creating these inflatable decoys is named Viktor Talanov, and before becoming one of the most important names in Ukrainian defense, he used to make hot air balloons, bounce houses, and equipment for children's parties. Talanov adapted his knowledge to create military replicas so convincing that today they are used not only by Ukrainian forces, but also by the United Kingdom and the United States in operational training. And Talanov's replicas arrived at a critical moment for Ukraine, because Ukraine has a problem that doesn't have an easy solution. It is losing real equipment on the battlefield. Tanks take months to produce and cost millions of dollars, and with the number of drones saturating the battlefield these days, any armored vehicle becomes an immediate target. You position a real tank in the field, and in a matter of hours, sometimes minutes, it shows up on an enemy drone's radar. Instead of exposing real equipment, Ukraine starts positioning inflatable replicas at the most strategic points on the front line, points where Russia needs to act, points where any movement draws attention, and then they let the enemy do the dirty work against targets that don't exist. These inflatable decoys can be set up in minutes. A small team can inflate and position a tank replica before the next reconnaissance drone passes through the area. And when they need to move, they move quickly, just like they would with real equipment. Russian intelligence sees the position logs, sees the movement, and starts treating it as a live target. But there's an obvious problem with all of this. A drone can get close, it can really take a look. So the question arises, how can a rubber replica fool modern military technology? Well, this is the part that really surprises you. These replicas are not simply pieces of painted canvas. They are built with a sophistication that goes far beyond visual appearance. Many of them have internal heat sources. When a Russian drone points its thermal camera at the target, it sees exactly the same kind of temperature that a real tank engine would produce. A Russian drone operator is monitoring the area. He sees what looks like a tank, checks visually, it looks like a tank. He checks with the thermal camera, it heats up like a tank. It's positioned in a strategic area just like a tank would be, so why wouldn't it be a tank? And the newer versions go even further. Ukrainian engineers are developing replicas with smoke generators to simulate engine exhaust, and with electronic components that emit fake radio and radar signals. The replica will start to sound like real equipment on enemy detection systems. From then on, distinguishing the fake from the real will require getting close, and getting close. That's exactly what the Russian forces can't do, and Ukraine won't allow it. Russia, of course, is not naive. In some cases, it realized it had hit a replica. But that's where the trap becomes even more elaborate. When Russia destroys an inflatable decoy, many times it records everything, publishes the video, celebrates, and presents it as a great victory for the army and for the Russian people. And the problem is that even when Russian analysts suspect the target was fake, propaganda ends up winning. After all, it's more useful to show a victory than to admit they spent a precision missile on a rubber dummy. Russia is stuck in a dilemma. If it admits it was deceived, it looks incompetent. If it doesn't admit it, it keeps attacking the same fake targets. In both cases, Ukraine wins. Tell me in the comments. In your opinion, which of the two options is worse for Russia? Admitting that it was deceived or continuing to attack ghosts? But there's something even more powerful happening here, which goes beyond propaganda. It's doubt. According to Talanov himself, even when a Russian operator suspects they're looking at a decoy, that suspicion has already served its purpose. Because now he has to stop, he has to think, he has to ask himself, is it fake or is it real? Should I attack? Should I call for support? Should I move on and look for another target? Every second spent with this doubt is a second the operator isn't doing reconnaissance, isn't planning attacks, isn't coordinating operations, and when you have a front line of more than 1,300 kilometers to manage, those seconds add up. They turn into minutes, the minutes turn into hours, and the hours turn into missed opportunities. Ukraine amplifies this effect in a very simple way. It constantly moves the decoys, repositioning them as if they were real equipment being moved tactically. Russian intelligence sees movement, sees what appears to be a genuine strategic repositioning. It starts tracking what it believes to be live targets, but in reality it's just following rubber dummies across the map. And this game comes at a price, an absurd price. A Ukrainian inflatable decoy costs around $25,000. Talanov himself confirmed this amount in an interview. $25,000 for a product that two men inflate and set up in less than 10 minutes. Now compare that with what Russia uses to destroy them. A Russian cruise missile can cost between $1 and $3 million. A high-precision attack drone, depending on the model, can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even the cheapest drones that Russia uses in attacks cost much more than the target that they are destroying. Every time Russia attacks a decoy, it trades a $25,000 investment for an expense of at least 40 times more, in some cases 100 times more. And it's not an isolated event. This is happening repeatedly at multiple points along the front line over the course of months. And the loss doesn't stop at the money. Every missile used against a rubber dummy is a missile that wasn't used against a real target. It's ammunition that took months to be produced in a factory, transported to the front line, and that simply disappeared with no result at all. And Russia is already having trouble supplying its own front lines, already having trouble replacing what it loses. Every waste like this really matters. When you put all this together, what you see is the picture of a war that Russia thought would last days and is now wearing the country down from the inside. In 2025, Ukrainian drone operations, combined with other strategies, managed to take up to 38% of Russia's oil refining capacity out of operation in a single month. In September, gasoline and diesel production dropped 18% compared to the previous month. Oil and gas have historically accounted for up to 40% of the Russian government's revenue. Striking this infrastructure repeatedly is a direct attack on the funding of the war. And even so, Russia keeps advancing, but the pace has become absurdly slow. Throughout the entire year of 2025, Russia's biggest territorial gains were thin strips of land, a few villages. Nothing that justifies the size of the effort and the human cost. An army that still has initiative in the field, advancing this slowly, can only mean one thing. And while the trap keeps working, the bill on the other side just keeps growing. A report from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, estimates that Russia has accumulated about 1,200,000 casualties between February 2022 and December 22, 2025. This includes killed, wounded, and captured. Out of this total, up to 325,000 would be combat deaths. That's when you understand the real size of the hole Russia has fallen into. The problem became so serious that in January 2026, Russia made military conscription official all year round. Before, mandatory military service had specific periods, now it's continuous. And the rules to avoid conscription became much stricter, making it much harder for Russians to leave the country before being drafted. Russia doesn't lack the will to attack, it lacks the manpower to attack. As you can see, Ukraine isn't trying to win this war by being more powerful than Russia. It's trying to win by being more efficient. Russia started this war with an advantage in everything: more soldiers, more tanks, more planes, more missiles, greater industrial capacity. 4 years later, these advantages have been worn down, one by Ukrainian innovations, Western support, and Russia's own strategic mistakes. And the inflatable decoys are a perfect example of that. It's not cutting-edge technology, it's not artificial intelligence, it's not a weapon system that cost billions to develop. It's rubber, it's air, it's a replica that a bouncy castle manufacturer built by adapting what they already knew how to do, and it's working. You know that Russian drone you saw at the beginning, approaching, firing, hitting its target. The operator who recorded that posted everything and celebrated. But that couldn't be further from the truth. That Iris-T was intact somewhere else. What exploded was a mock-up made of foam and scrap. Mission accomplished. If you like this video and want to keep up with what's happening in this war, be sure to subscribe to the channel. See you next time.